There we go. Hey, Peter. Hey,
John, good to see you.
it's great to see you again. So, thanks everyone for joining out there or listening to our podcast. I have the pleasure to have Peter Aiken on the podcast today. And as many know that wanted to come here, they know a little bit about Peter. I'll let him introduce himself. I'm John Miller. I am part of DAMA Los Angeles, and I'm the host. So,
Chief cook and bottle washer as well,
yeah.
right?
I love it. And I'm so technically gifted, I couldn't teach Peter how to get the app working. So we've got a rock and roll background from him. I see his bass guitars there. Maybe he'll play a few notes. Anyway, let's have some fun and talk about AI and data. And why don't you teach us a little bit about yourself, do a quick intro, and then we can have some fun and get right into it.
Thank you, John. And thank you so much for inviting me today. It's great to be with everybody and a new format here. Yes. What
Well,
happens as you get old, we accumulate, right, John?
no, dude, I love it. And what I love seeing is, that you have spent time reading and reorganizing, and this is who we are, right? As human beings, we collect knowledge, and that is
It's a bit of chaos because I end up doing a bunch of different things. I've been a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University now since 1993. And at the same time, the fact that we're still stuck in some ways, not able to get the word out. And that is one of the reasons I'm so enthusiastic about new ventures like such as you guys are doing here in Los Angeles to really sort of lead the way and say there are other means of communicating with people. I've been president of DAMA now. I'm rolling off the board officially in December of this year. And so January 1st, DAMA will have a new president for the first time in 6 years. And neither a good thing nor a bad thing. We've managed to go a long way in terms of getting from where we were to where we want to be, and that's good. But at the same time, it's entirely appropriate to look at other ideas and bring in other priorities and things like that and see whether we're going to change things. We want to, of course, be on track with the DIMBOK 3. The third hat that I wear is really just generally being available to help people, and it's very nice to have a university job. I really enjoy the work here, but it does give me some free time. And let's be quite frank, it is my office hours that I'm forced by the university to keep for the students, but I leave them open to anybody. And I meet so many of you through that. I had somebody call me up from the Middle East recently and say, look, I just need a 1-hour lecture on this kind of thing here. And many people would be like, yeah, that's a real bother, but I like meeting new people and like going to new places. So I kind of consider myself an ambassador in that sense to welcome to the data world. I introduce myself as a professor with a positive cash flow, which is sort of unusual in the university
that
context.
is
But I've brought
unusual.
in far more than they've ever given me out in terms of compensation for that. And that just makes it a very easy thing to do.
I'd love to drop in the links to the elections and that recording about the DMBOK. And, the reason we started the podcast, as you just highlighted, is we felt it was a great way to communicate and meet people where they are. And maybe they listen to the podcast on their drive or whenever they get a chance, hear how specialists, experts, and practitioners in our industry are thinking about data topics that are important to their professional career. Thanks for posting. Anybody that's listening in today and has a question they want to ask us as we go through our conversation, please feel free to ask us questions. Let's get started.
As far as getting started, let's talk about this additional medium. I heard somebody joke the other day that said if you're listening to a podcast, you're probably doing something else. And there's nothing really wrong with that. It is true that as human beings, we are not able to perfectly multitask, and it would be nicer if we could. But that's just the reality of the situation. That said, we have been able to develop a process. When I drive 35 minutes down to the university, I take my iPhone with me, and I have a couple of podcasts lined up that I'm specifically listening for. In addition to that, our executives also participate in these kinds of activities. Many of the AIs now will create a podcast of a topic.
Yeah.
And the example that I use is that as a university professor, I'm supposed to be responsible for 162 policies. And I can assure you, John, as soon as we finish here, I will go back to my studying of each of these policies that I'm reading through carefully so that I understand and never forget any aspect of these 162 policies. Thank you so much for laughing. That is the appropriate reaction there. Yes.
That's
There's not a
right. That
chance
was
in the world.
yes.
But
Yeah,
I took all
I
of those
love where you're
policies and I loaded them into an AI, and now I can
yes.
ask questions about them from the AI's perspective. But if you can imagine anything more boring than having to, read university policies, I don't know. For some people, it definitely is listening, but for others, it would be no, I'd rather listen to it. It's some people some people learn through doing, some people learn through watching, some people learn through listening. And we're opening up an entire channel here to talk to people about data in a vastly different way around us. Now, have you ever worked for a company that does safety culture?
Yeah, of course.
I
You
can't take a PowerPoint inside without going through an hour of safety procedures. And I'm not saying this to make fun of them. I
right.
understood they took it very seriously. And so I applaud them for their dedication to this. This is the kind of dedication we need around some data efforts here as well, so that we can get into them and really get people to buy into what's going on in these areas. So I'm thinking that wouldn't it be a great resource to have 1,000 data minutes so that if you were getting ready to start a meeting, you could sort of reach up here or reach into your pocket and get a data minute to pop out and just have a little data minute discussion the same way as these companies have safety minutes. It would do a lot.
Okay, so let me interject because you've gone from talking about podcasts to anchoring this into the first clear example of how AI can help us as data practitioners tell our stories by creating interesting snippets that we could use Notebook LM or whatever that all of the
All of them do
chatbots,
everything. So yeah.
yeah, they all do it this version of a thing where you can create an interesting minute that you can share with people in your team or in across your organization, or it's a great new way to communicate. And
And let's take it even further than what you said,
please.
because I was able to use it in one instance where I had a situation where they were doing some remedial data quality work. Okay,
Yeah,
basically they were changing information on invoices and they wanted to catch them before they went out of the system and with the wrong information on them. And that was fine. They were catching, virtually 99% of the things that were there. The data quality remediation effort was working, but it was clearly playing whack-a-mole because they were only finding
right.
things after they had already gotten through the system. And it was delaying cash flow for this organization by
Yeah.
30 days. Now, the person who was in charge of that effort was about to add another 100 people to it because he considered by his measures he was so successful in the process. Better than that, what was actually going on, I went down to the hall to talk to the finance person, very, very smart lady who just looked at me and said, look, if you can fix it for less than $750 million, that's a positive return on my investment. Again, the perspectives that we have because we don't have the various backgrounds and things makes it a little bit difficult because data is in everything. And until we can relate it to something that is tangible for these people and then get it to them via a means that they're ready to receive it by. And if I think the
Well,
podcast is the way they learn.
I had a data quality issue. I was literally I'm building a system with my co-founder, and he's a banker or a finance guy, and I'm a simple data person, right? And I was saying, listen, what do you call a fact? And he said, well, a fact is actually, if it's in the contract for the loan agreement, that's a fact. And I said, well, give me an example. He said, well, the fact that the debt service coverage ratio has to be over 1.4. And he started to say things. And I said, well, you know what? I would call that a business rule. And, I've been doing it for a long time. But, dude, if people in finance that you hang with that our product is built for want to call it fact, and he said, well, yes, why don't we call it a contractual rule? So we came up with the term that keeps the essence of a contract and the essence of a rule because, in data quality literature, dude, we talk about business rules, quality rules. And so it's like that literally just happened. I recorded the conversation with Granola and cut and paste the answer our little conversation into Claude Code and bazinga. That was how we taught that we got through two arbitrarily complex data quality, data governance rule discussions. I couldn't follow. He's too smart. He knows his domain so deeply that by explaining it, talking about it, and then sharing our discussion with Claude Code, dude, we just created some PRs and now our system has data quality rules in it. And I wouldn't have even thought of that until you reminded me, oh, we're doing a podcast. It is about communicating, meeting people where they are. If they want to have a conversation and you can relate and you can explain why you think it's this and the other person thinks it's that, suddenly we can take all of the opaqueness of our vocabulary. Even the word opaque might be too dense, but if we can make it easier to have that conversation, to capture these quality rules, like, dude, I am so excited because I think AI is giving us a chance as data practitioners to take everything we've always preached and make it something we can communicate. Like, I can't wait.
Created not just one, but two data minutes there, John, right?
Dude,
The
I
first one
like,
is the collaboration with the end user, what we call the
yeah,
subject matter
yeah,
experts, right? And making them feel like they're part of the solution, that what you're doing is valuable to them.
yeah,
You know, you can go to any CEO worldwide and ask getting my employees to speak the same language. Just as a
yeah,
hard thing, they understand it. That don't mean that one speaks Russian and one speaks
right.
Chinese. They mean that they don't speak business and IT vocabulary in the same way, and that's a real source of friction
No,
in the
dude,
organizations.
that has been the hardest thing. You realize that communication is a thing, and let me give you a quote that I loved. It's that, the hardest problem of communication is the illusion it's actually taking place, right? And so I think if we just use AI to help our communication with our stakeholders, dude, yeah. When are we going to create this startup, Peter? Because we've got to, this will be the first thing. We should add that to the website so people can, anyway, I'm getting overly enthusiastic, but that's,
In the old days, we used to stereotype the data. It was the IT community. If you were an
yeah, yeah,
IT person, there were two characteristics in particular that just slotted you right in. The two characteristics were that you were two standard deviations above the norm in your need for growth, the need to learn new things, to absorb, to continue. You were mentioning learning the business rules for an organization that you were
yeah,
working
yeah,
with. I have a friend in New York City that's a data modeler that changes her job every 5 years just to go learn another
yeah,
industry. You know, and she has no idea how valuable she is because she could literally tell you what the utilities companies are doing versus what the banks are doing versus, you know, the various sectors that she's lived within. But go a little bit further. We can take the infographics that come out of these AI tools and use them as rallying points of ways to getting around. One of the first things I do with organizations that are starting out on their data journey is just print out copies of the Dimbach wheel, right? It's
yeah.
not perfect. It is admittedly imperfect, but it is a recognized symbol and people understand it and people ask questions about it. It's not threatening to them. It's a very good confidence builder. Again, all the things that we're doing here are things that we can start to broaden our way of communicating about these. And I mentioned the woman whose cash flow was delayed by 30 days. We actually went back to the AI and said, how would you present this argument? And it had actually understood, gave us a beautiful representation of it, and said, now, which of these is the better way to go? And, you know, one way paid out a lot of money very quickly, and the other way used a lot of money and cost them time. And it was just, there's the case. Boom. Now we go on. And management rallied around it and went, wow, that's a really good argument. And can we really do that? And yes, you know,
Yeah,
it didn't
yeah,
take them
no,
long at
dude,
all.
we've been wanting to fix this systemic issue with a process that's not collecting the data the way it
So
could or should, and
why do you
yeah.
think that's been so hard for us?
I do think that the hardest problem in computer science that computer scientists are take a beat or two to recognize is communication. Technology people are going to be like this, or business people are going to be like that, or finance people, but actually, people are much more rich and have a lot more to say. I just think that augmenting our clarity of communication through AI is sort of the one of the superpower things that I've seen. The one I wanted to mention that I think you were talking about, which is using AI to create an argument or a straw man argument for why. Here's two different options for explaining that concept or an analogy. I've actually started using it to draw pictures, have been for a while, to create an SVG diagram or an HTML page that explains this, create a cartoon.
There's
Even
a
Claude Code could do that, create cartoons or explain it like it's five or show me two
or
options, you know?
just even good sources. There's a woman on LinkedIn that we've been following recently named Claire Kitching, and she's out of Australia, and she does really, really nice articulations. And so everybody is now going, well, we're just going to use Claire's definition because it's so well done and attribute it to her. Let me drive to another point, though, that I think you were touching around the edges of, and that is the
Yep.
lack of comparisons. So if you are looking at the process of doing what we call design, whether it's big D design like Apple does, like they design an entire product all the way through, or we talk about requirements design, coding, implementation, the old
Yeah,
waterfall
yeah.
models kind of thing, or whatever variation that we're doing in the agile sprints, things like that. One of the things that's critical in doing design is to compare two designs. So if somebody
Yes.
comes to me and says, "Will
Yeah.
you help evaluate our design?" I tell them that it's part of design practice to have two things to compare. And if they only have one, they
Yeah,
have
yeah.
not done what they're supposed to be doing, which is giving you that opportunity to compare it. It exercises your brain in a different way. And AI can help us a lot in that area and do things that are helpful. I'm not suggesting that the exercises are nonsensical, but they're not happen most of the time because most people say, "Why would you design it twice? Once you've designed it once, don't you have it?" Well, every design should be influenced by strategy. And so it's got to
Yeah.
be some combination of faster, better, cheaper, or less risky around those areas. And if we don't have that, our design is incomplete, our architecture is incomplete, our thing that we're trying to build is not well specified. Any idea what the hardest part of doing requirements is? So now we're back into requirements, and then we do
Okay,
design,
well,
and then we do
this
code, and then we
is
do test, and then
I got a lot to say about this. So, I link it back to common understanding, right? A common vocabulary. And that's just because I've been hanging out with library science, knowledge management folks that I love. I mean, I didn't realize as a data management guy and with the convergence of that we're all seeing with data and knowledge management, we're living in great times because we're just learning that we each have a vocabulary that's different. And if we had a common one, we could be talking about the same thing. Oh my God. It's like the contractual rules versus business rules versus facts. A guy kept saying, dude, that's a fact. I'm like, okay, this is how I've been thinking about it for 30 years. I'm okay with modifying because what we've done in this app is I said, listen, we're going to manage the controlled vocabulary for our app. So while we're designing the app and gathering requirements, we are getting AI to map it against our common vocab so that when we create the contractual rules, you can see it all ding, ding, ding. All the links are connecting.
And you're not promising nirvana, but you're promising easier, better, more communication, more direct, right? Less
And
confusion.
it's something we've always preached. And I was telling some friends that, dude, in the last 30 years, I think it's the first time in my lifetime where I can do the things I thought I could have done 20 years ago or a decade ago. And I feel that we as data management professionals have now a whole new set of tools to achieve what we were always sort of passionate about because of that.
The question was, what is the hardest part of doing requirements, right? Which is always a trick
Yeah.
question. But my mentor Al Davis gave me this particular one. The hardest part of doing requirements is not doing design. And you were back at your problem specification, which actually leads us back to AI, which is really the topic that everybody wants us to focus on. How can we as data management professionals benefit from this topic that we are going to or should have such a tremendous influence on? There are only so many people that are getting this, and it has been obviously the communication has to reside with us as our fault, but a lot of people think, well, there's only a certain percentage of the population, which goes back to the stereotyping that you were
Yeah. That's
talking about before. They were of the belief that only 3 to 5% of the entire U.S. population would ever get it, and that's like, wow, we might as well give up if that's the case. And I don't
yeah.
think that's correct, but I understand why the perception might be around that topic. You mentioned something else, though, John. You said you stumbled into it, and I did the same thing, of course. So many of us out there have been in IT for a long time. And what happens is people start talking about, why didn't it work better? The answer is because you probably should have taken a look at the data earlier on. Maybe that's your helpful suggestion. So then we go down another big project, we build it again. You're like, look, I told you guys last time you should really look at the data. And they're like, yeah, we did hear you last time. And you were right last time, you're right tonight. So that's good. We'll try and learn from that process. And we go a little bit further down now. We're in the third project. And you're like, data, 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 data. And they're going, you're now the data guy, John. Congratulations, right? And it really is a 10 to 15 year gap of people bumping their head against IT and trying to get into it and breaking in and then finding, oh, look, there's a whole set of vocabularies, there's a whole set of practices around this. Had to go through for their state departments of transportation and learn about data governance individually until somebody at the federal level came along and said, that's a really bad idea. Let's get them all to do it together. And they weren't able to get everybody together, but they were able to get a dozen or so together that worked. And that was better than everybody learning individually. It comes down to the numbers sometimes. In terms of that, and the fact that there's so much untapped productivity out
Yeah.
there where people are spending time in IT when they really, wow, I actually was really a data person all along, right? But like you said, you came to it through library sciences.
Quoted a couple of people I don't know. But Al Davis, was it, that
Mhm.
was talking about requirements? Teach us, is he one of the scholars on this matter, or just a smart guy you
Interesting.
ran across, or what? Teach me.
If you think about it, when we do things, the thing we don't do enough of is spending more time on the problem. There's the famous Einstein quote: "If I was given, 1 minute to live, I would spend 50 seconds of it trying to figure out what the problem was, and
Yeah.
then 10 seconds trying to implement the solution around that." We tend to, just as human beings, it's a natural thing for humans to be problem solvers, and so we tend to jump in and try and solve the problem before we have a full understanding of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
that's the type
that
of thinking that gets us to where there's enormous amounts of data debt out there. Again, plug for the new book that's coming on out on data debt. The other characteristic of IT people back in the 60s and 70s, as we were starting out, was two standard deviations: need for growth. Okay, that's very
yeah,
natural. We like that's complementary. But the other was two standard deviations below the need for socialization. Luckily, we've overcome most of that, and most of the data people I know are quite articulate. What we don't have is a body for them to study. We have a lot of practices, a lot of case studies, but we don't really have a proper way of going out and saying, here's the knowledge and skills that you need to have, because we don't have agreement even on it just yet. And,
yeah.
and again, the thing that was
Is
so
that a
great about
plug
Al
for
Davis,
DM Bach, or where are you
well,
going
the
with that?
version 3 will be a revision of version 2, which is the practice areas that we have.
Okay.
But no, we're there's several groups that are working for it. I'm hoping we can get them together because I'd rather have a combined effort rather than a competing effort situation.
Well, okay, so I just wanna put a note out there to the audience, a few minutes ago saying, "Hey, we're trying to focus
Around
around is AI and data, and not just data for AI, but AI for data." And it's a good way to think about how we can take advantage of it in our roles. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw one out here.
wanted to circle back. You
Yeah.
you had used the word augmenting, and again, that's another
Okay.
the very specific meaning in that case, and I think that's the right word to use. I've used it as well. It goes back to an article from 1945 in the Atlantic magazine by a guy named Vannevar Bush, who was Franklin Roosevelt's science advisor during World War II. And he was trying to figure out what we're going to do with all this pent up energy that had previously been devoted to breaking things and killing people, and now focus it in on a positive way of creation. And his concept around that was this thing called a memex. Exactly right.
That's right. Yes.
And so that augmentation that he described there is, I think, the process that people have to keep in mind as they're thinking about it. We're not trying to get AI to think for us. It's never been intended to do anything other than simulate intelligence. But if we can use that concept of its simulation to augment what we do, then we have the real possibility. And you gave a couple of really good examples at the very beginning of way in which you had sort of focused in on specific areas by saying it's this big and I'm going to just solve this problem. Having a AI chat mediate a conversation between a subject matter expert and a data modeler and have that information go there, I would postulate
Yeah.
that getting good at that could actually lead us to replace the functionality of case tools, which is probably not a popular concept, and I certainly have
Dude,
not
wait,
tried it.
wait. I haven't heard the term case tools.
Well,
Is that
yeah,
still
right.
a
I mean,
thing?
that's
Am
sad.
I
We don't even teach that they exist in schools anymore. I mean,
No,
it's
but
it's just
isn't
sad.
that I don't wanna get too controversial, but yeah, dude. I think let me ask you a question. I look at it a little differently. I grew up at the beginning of home computers in the house, right? And, my dad was a math teacher, so that's how I nerded out. And here we are, I don't know, 50 some years later. And we're seeing an emergence of a technology that changes, or that allows a lot of the things that we've always said we wanted to do to now be possible. And I think when I study methodologies that I used to do and things I used to do, dude, I did it for the reason it was relevant to the era of computing that I was in, and there are methodologies that have come and gone and there was a time when we thought we could design everything and then magic would be generated.
AD cycle?
Listen, dude, I remember seeing that as a kid or coming out of uni, just thinking, wow, these consultants really know how to decompose the problem, which is probably why I got into consulting as long as I did. And what I see is that the methodology, we have to let go. We have to let go some of the things we thought were still valuable. And we have to know that everything that we thought was valuable had a purpose at the time that can be reapplied. But please, goodness, don't use the words of the past. Teach us how to think about them in the now. And then maybe that's just because I've gotten old, where I have to teach using the language of today, understand the ideas of the past. But that's why I think, gosh, if somebody is separating requirements from design, I think that's the worst idea I've ever heard. I think that's a naive, that was true at the time. It's
Mhm.
still true that we need to spend 50 seconds on understanding the problem. But if we're designing systems for businesses, it's actually, why wouldn't you? If there's no time between, it takes seconds to get the requirements, design it, build it, test it, and play with it, then I don't have to gate every part of my thinking process the way I used to.
You can move faster, there's no question, and if you do it defensively, I mean, that's a great application for AI then, is to say, "I'm gonna be moving, and I'm gonna be moving fast, and I'm gonna be looking for rapid results, and I'm gonna be incentivized by any positive feedback that you give me. Your job is to explicitly try to break what I'm doing."
Yeah, yeah.
Again, it's the standard old trick where you've got somebody that want me to test your software or test your new app or test whatever.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of we're doing this for, right? If I'm doing a
Yeah.
test and say it looks fine, here you go, great, that's no problem. If on the other hand you do what you're supposed to do, which is you get paid to break it, and you go after it and actually break it, then that's where they turn around and say thank you for breaking it before it got on the market and before I had to lose face in front of the customers. In manufacturing, it's called the 1-10-100 rule. And it's just basically that if it costs you 1 penny to fix it at the source, it'll cost you 10 cents by the time you've gotten it to whatever warehouse equivalent that you do,
Yeah.
and 100 or $1 full by the time you get it out to where the customer does it.
That might be a great place to sort of end the conversation, because we are seeing a change in methodologies and the way we're thinking about things. And what I know for a fact is that whatever I thought yesterday, some of it is changing today. And so I'm open to new methodologies like the 1-10-100 rule. I think those rules of thumb, those heuristics, those ways of thinking, very valuable. And we shouldn't let them go, and we need to break them. Like, let's prove why it's wrong. And if we can do that with AI, then we'll actually probably teach ourselves why it was valuable in the first place, which is what I'm going to go do. So, anyway, Peter, dude, we usually go 45. I'm going a little late. I just want to thank you for engaging in whatever
What a
this
great
was.
conversation. Absolutely. That was fun. Great to play with you.
Okay, Peter, more of the same. And I don't think we got any questions. So, hey, everyone, thanks for listening to two guys talk about data and AI. Cheers.
Bye bye.